Hey folks, Vincent here from thecreativedojo.net. It is currently Tuesday in the afternoon. I have my coffee and I'm ready to go ahead and do my first visual effects tutorial. So bear with me if it's a little bit lacking. First one, trying to get used to it. A lot of steps, a lot of procedures, and it's kind of something new. So let's get started. This is what we're going to be creating today. A somewhat of a composited, really crappy meteor, but a lot of you guys liked it here. So let me just preview what we're going to be creating today. So we're not going to be creating any of that nice explosion impact here or anything like that, but we are going to be focusing on building this asteroid first. Maybe we can focus on the explosion and all that stuff a little bit later on in another tutorial, but in this tutorial I want to focus on creating this thing, tracking it, compositing it, and creating all the little minor details like the reflections and shadows here. Just start off pretty basic as my first one. So let's get started. Now there are a few assets I'm going to be using. First is a stock footage from VidEasy. This is the one that I'm currently using here, the New York City skyline stock video here. Again, the links will be in the video description down below. But I really encourage you guys to use your own footage, so you can practice doing different kind of things and, not exactly copy everything I do for every single shot here. So, I recommend doing your own, using your own footage and just trying different things and, get some different results here. But again, the links will be in the video description down below for this site. Really cool site just for some nice stock footage that you can play around with. It's all royalty free here, so check it out, videasy.com. Links will be in the video description. Now, I'm also going to be using a few elements from Action Essentials 2, which include some of the fire elements here. So I have Fire 02, 03, Fire at Cam 02, and Fire at Cam 04. Now I'll also be using a cloudlet image from Video Copilot. This one's actually free here. You can grab it in a project file. But feel free to use your own cloud images, and you can also find some pretty nice, neat fire elements online for free via Google, maybe even Detonation Films. Check it out, a whole bunch of free stuff here. Don't have to use paid products. But yeah, let's go ahead and start this tutorial. It's a rather basic one, so let's create a new composition here. And we'll call this one main comp. And we'll make it about 6 seconds long, hit OK. Now I'm just going to drag my stock footage, the New York City skyline clip, into the composition here. And this is a really basic wide angle shot of New York City skyline here. I'm going to trim my composition down all the way. We don't need it that long, approximately 6 seconds or so. So we'll just move maybe somewhere around here, trim it. Trim comp to work area, just so we have a pretty short clip of the New York City skyline here. And the first thing you want to do is track this thing. Now, I'm in Adobe After Effects CSX, so I have the 3D camera tracker, but you can definitely get away with just a standard 2D tracker with an After Effects CS5.5 and below, or you can use third-party plugins such as the Foundry's camera tracker. It doesn't really matter. There's not that much movement going on in this clip here, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit track camera, and it's gonna analyze the clip in the background and then just track it, and I'll see you guys once this is done. Alright, so the 3D camera tracker is done tracking the clip here, and we can kind of view how well it did by clicking on the render track points here. And you can see that all the track points should stick on to the buildings and whatever object you have in the scene pretty well, and as you can see, it does. And so now we're going to create a camera, so hit create camera. And it's going to create a 3D camera to simulate the camera in this shot so that all of our 3D objects will react as if it was in this shot here. So now that we have our footage tracked and we have a 3D camera, let's go ahead and set up a basic rig. I'm going to create a new null object. And we'll name this control. We'll make it a 3D layer. And I'm going to create a new light, so layer new light. And this will be for particular. So in this case, I'm going to name the light name to emitter. Point light is fine. Hit OK. So now we have a light here. I'm going to hit P on the keyboard to bring up the position. Hit P on the keyboard again for the controls position. And I'm going to link these two parameters together. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option on the Mac. Click on the stopwatch here for the emitter position and link it to the controls position here. And if I go to View and show layer controls, you can see that our light is stuck onto our control null object here. So if I move the null object, it also moves the light, just so we have more control over everything with just one control null object here. So fairly simple. Let's go ahead and move on to the fun stuff, and that's creating the, meteor or asteroid. So let's go ahead and create a new composition for this meteor. We'll call this one Meteor. And we'll make it 6 seconds long. And then we'll go back into our project media panel. And I have a few fire elements here once again. Now these aren't any specific fire elements here. I just randomly went through the Action Essentials 2-pack and just chose some of these random fire elements. So, you know, you don't have to actually copy the exact files I'm using. These are just completely random that I just picked out of the collection. Nothing specific or anything. These aren't the best ones or anything like that. So we just have a whole bunch of fire elements. Let's go ahead and focus on Fire 02 first. And as you can see, we just have a standard strip of flames here, nothing too complicated. Now, to curve this thing up, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can use twirl, you can use mass, displacement, and all that stuff. I'm going to use something called polar coordinates, drag it into our Fire 02 footage here. I'm going to change the type of conversion to rect to polar, and I'm going to increase the interpolation up. And as you can see, you kind of get this really rounded shape of fire here. It looks pretty cool. You can flip it, you can do whatever you want with it. Now you are going to notice some harsh lines, but don't worry about that. It won't matter too much as we composite things in. So we just have a nice ring of flames here. And this can be pretty interesting for a lot of things, maybe like the Lord of the Rings series or something like that. But just scale it down a hair. And we'll move on to Fire 03. We'll do the same thing. We'll just copy this polar coordinates, paste it into Fire 03, and you can see that we have, again, a large flame here. So let me just scale this one down a little bit. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to add a lot of variation to this flame ball here, and we kind of want to fill in the center full of flames, as we see here. Now next, I'm going to focus on Fire at Cam. Go ahead and paste it in, the polar coordinates here. And again, I want to scale this one down a little bit even more, maybe bring it up. And again, this is all experimental, so rotate it, flip it, do whatever you want. The goal is trying to fill this flame up and just make it look a little unique with a lot of animation here. Bring this one, we'll paste the polar coordinates in. And this one I want to scale down just a little bit. Maybe rotate it here. And then feel free to play around with the blending modes. So right now we have this random ball of fire. Doesn't look too good, so let me go ahead and duplicate some of these Fire at Cam ones here and delete their polar coordinates. And let's just add a little flare to this thing. So let me just take a look at what this does here. May want to rotate this around and adjust it at the top. Doesn't have to look exactly perfect, and as a matter of fact, you can even go into more detail by masking things out and just feathering things off so you don't get those harsh edges and just blend things in a little bit better. But you know, we're just kind of experimenting here. We'll move this one up top a little bit, maybe rotate it to the side, just so we have an intense little fireball here. And of course, you can go into more detail if you wanted to. And then you want to change this one to maybe add or something. Get some nicer blending modes going on. So this is looking pretty cool. Now it's still looking a little bit harsh though. And so let's go ahead and just kind of blur this out a little bit, add some more variation to it. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. We'll call this one blur. And we're going to apply a CC radial fast blur just to kind of smooth things in and kind of blend them in a little bit. I'm going to decrease the amount. Just keep it somewhat like that. It's going to act somewhat as a glow here, just to kind of blend things in. And I'm going to change the blending mode to whatever I want. I find that depending on what you're using, divide looks pretty cool. If you do some color correction, this is a really hot, intense flame here. Looks very almost game-like here. Or you can change it to add, and it's just going to give you a whole bunch of variations depending on what you want to do, or even classic color burn or something here. So let's just pick one here. As a matter of fact, I may even go with screen. And this is just going to give us a lighter kind of flame. So pretty cool, pretty intense. I'm going to create another new adjustment layer. We'll call this one displacement. And you can guess that the flame looks pretty cool now and it's animating, but we want to add some more variation, more dynamic to this fireball here. After all, it is pretty intense. So we're going to add a turbulent displace to the displacement adjustment layer here. And this is just going to add some turbulence to our flame here. So we're going to keep the amount around 40 or so, but we want to decrease the size just so we get smaller kind of turbulence here. So as you can see, if I change the evolution, you can see that kind of just wiggles things up. So I'm going to hit Alt or Option and click on the evolution. I want to type in time times maybe 50 or so, and it's just going to automatically animate the evolution here, just so we have some random movement. Because before, as you can see, our sphere is kind of very circular, a little bit too perfect. You want to add some more displacement to it to make it look a little bit more organic and less perfect. And you can even go further by adding a rock texture, adding some roughened edges, and create an actual rock asteroid here in Photoshop, whatever you want. I'm just going to stick with the fireball here, but again, you can do more to it by adding a rock texture or something like that to it. So back into the main comp here, let's go ahead and bring our fireball composition into the scene here. Looks pretty crappy, but we'll be doing some color correction in a bit. I'm going to change the blending mode from normal to perhaps add. And again, I really want to encourage you guys to experiment with the blending modes, experiment with all the settings here. This is all just arbitrary values I'm just messing around with in this tutorial. Now the next thing you want to do is first you want to make this thing a 3D object here. So our meteor is now a 3D object. And it disappears because the light is affecting the meteor here. So let me just go ahead and go to the meteor, go to the material options, and turn off accept lights. And then turn off accept shadows as well. That way, our light's not going to affect our meteor here. And we want to link the meteor to our control here. So I'm going to hit P on the keyboard once again. And just like the emitter, we're going to link the position of the meteor to the control's position. So now, whenever we move the control, it moves the light as well as the meteor here. So pretty cool. Now let's go ahead and animate our control null object. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And I want to push the control way back in Z space. All the way back here, maybe move it up, just so it's kind of out of frame. We'll move to the beginning of the timeline, adjust it, and we'll hit a keyframe for the position, and we'll move maybe 4 seconds in or so, and we'll just push it all the way back in Z space to our city. And you just want to go and grab this handle and just kind of adjust the path a little bit, just so it's not so dynamic and linear here, just so we have a really nice curve to our path here. So we're just going to fly in, just like that. So that's pretty cool. We may want to scale down our meteor. So let's go ahead and start creating our smoke element here. So I'm going to take our smoke cloud element here, and I'm going to drag it into a new comp button. And we'll call this one smoke particle. And we're going to use this little particle here as a custom particle for particular. So go back into our main comp. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. We'll call this one smoke. And we'll go into the effects and presets and search in particular. Drag in trap code particular. And we'll go into the emitter and set the emitter type from point to light. So now the emitter is actually the emitter light here. So now our particular particles are following our null object. And you can kind of get the sense of idea of what we're doing right now. So let's go ahead and turn the particle count down to maybe around 60. We'll go down and we'll change the velocity to maybe around 10 or so. We'll turn all this off to 0 for all the velocities here. And we'll go down to the particles, and we want to bring in our smoke particle into the main comp here. Now we're just using it as a reference, so we don't need to actually see it. So we'll just shut off the eyeball switch for the smoke particle. It's just going to be used as a reference. So back into particular, we're going to change the particle type from sphere to sprite colorize, and you'll see why I picked colorize in a second. We'll go into the texture and select our custom particle, which is our smoke particle. And if we scale the size up, you can see that our particles are no longer little spheres, they're actually our smoke particles. But they look a little bit too perfect here. So we can change that by going into the rotation and enabling random rotation a little bit, so you just get some random rotation. We'll go into the size random, crank that up a little bit. We'll crank up the opacity random a little bit. We'll also decrease the opacity a little bit, just to get some more realistic dynamic smoke. And the goal in visual effects and compositing is just to make things look natural, make things look real, and don't make things look too perfect here. So we just have this nice puff of smoke just bursting out here. We'll go ahead and increase the size a little bit. And I also want to go into the set color at birth. This is a constant color. We want to select over life. And we get this crazy clown looking smoke here. So let's go and change this thing. I'm going to go into the color over life. I'm going to select a basic preset here. And then we'll change the first color to a nice hot orange red. And this is going to simulate, I guess, fake shading. So I'm going to go and select this one, change it to black. We'll just push this, adjust these. And we'll change this color to a little bit lighter here as a fake fall off. So basically what we're doing here is we're creating fake shading and lighting for our smoke based on a gradient here. Let's go ahead and drag our smoke underneath our meteor here. So we have something like that. Now let's go into the size over life here. And this is probably the trickiest part. You want to make the smoke look a little bit real. We want a big head of smoke on the very top here. So we'll start off pretty large. And then as time progresses, we're going to fade it down just a little bit, just so we have a more realistic kind of smoke here. So now let's go ahead and go back into the color over life and kind of adjust our gradient here. We want a little bit of red smoke at the beginning, and then you want to fade it off to black, and then finally just fade the rest to kind of a light gray here. Now let's go ahead and go and increase the number of particles and increase the size just a little bit. And as you can see, now that we did that, the smoke looks a little bit too perfect. So let's go back down to the size random, increase that a little bit. Increase the opacity randomness a little bit. And then to kind of displace our smoke particles position, we'll go into the physics, go into the air, go to the turbulence field, and then we can change this a little bit. So we can go and increase the effect position. And then we can go ahead and tone down the evolution speed so it won't move too fast. And we just have a very big puff of smoke here. And then I'm going to go into the velocity all the way up top and just increase that just a little bit. So maybe 20 or so. And, you know, keep on playing around with it and get some nice random movement here. Let's go ahead and increase the life as well to maybe around 6 seconds long so it doesn't die out on us. And as you can see, visual effects is just all this experimenting and just playing around with the parameters to make it look right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of cheat a little bit and create a new lens flare. We'll call this lens flare. And you can use no light factory or optical flares. I'm going to use optical flares in this case, drag it into our lens flare layer here. And we'll change the blending mode from normal to add, so it's going to blend into our scene. And we'll go into the options. And in this tutorial, I'm just going to use a really basic preset in the lights. We'll select a light scatter, see how that works. Hit OK. And we'll change the positioning mode from 2D to track lights. So just like particular, it's going to track to our lights here. So the lens flare is going to follow our light. And then we can go ahead and scale it up. And then maybe tint it a little warmer to a nice orange color. And as you can see, we kind of have our asteroid here. So let me just go ahead and go to view and turn off our show layers. So as you can see, we're kind of cheating here. Let's go ahead and use a different preset here. I'm not liking that too much. Let's choose evening sun. And then we'll turn down the scale. So let's go ahead and do a quick RAM preview. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and tighten the control a little bit. So it's a little bit too slow, so we'll just increase the speed of it. We'll also go into the lens flare, and as you can see, the lens flare is pretty static right now. So let's go ahead and add some basic flickering. We'll go into the flicker, set the speed and the amount to maybe around 15. So now we have a more convincing dynamic light here. And it's going to simulate that flickering that you see in a meteor. I'm assuming, I've never seen a meteor before, but I'm just assuming there would be some flickering and sparks flying around and stuff like that. So this is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and create that nice realistic shadow and the reflection to kind of simulate more realistic results here. So I'm going to duplicate the smoke layer by hitting Control Command D. We'll call this reflection smoke. And we'll go into layer, transform, and we're going to flip it vertically. So as you can see, double smoke here. We'll decrease the opacity, and we'll go into the effects and presets and search in for fast blur. And we'll just apply the fast blur to the reflection smoke here. Repeat edge pixels, and we'll just blur it out a little bit. And then you want to decrease the opacity even more. And we may want to go into the color here, and we'll just set it to black to be very, very generic. We'll even blur it out a little bit more, and then decrease the opacity. And we'll do the same thing for the lens flare. We'll just duplicate the lens flare. We'll flip it, and we'll go ahead and tone down the scale a little bit. We'll apply a fast blur to it. We'll blur it out. We'll decrease the opacity a little bit and make it a little bit larger here. And tone down the brightness. We want to be very diffused, like that. You know, something like that. Make it more convincing. And we don't really need to duplicate the actual meteor element because, you know, our lens flare kind of takes care of that simulated light. So this is pretty cool, and you may want to go ahead and change some of the lens flare elements as well. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up by doing a basic color correction. So I'll go into layer new, and we'll create a new adjustment layer. And we'll type in CC for color correction. And that's somewhat a lie because we're going to do color grading and color correction within the color correction adjustment layer. So in this case, I'll be using Colorista, but you can use the free version of Colorista or even use the curves effect and stuff like that. But I like Colorista too. Very, very powerful and very, very easy. So let's go down to the exposure. We'll just drop the exposure down a little bit. And we'll decrease the density a little bit. And for the shadows, I'm going to select a really nice dark semi-teal blue color. And then for the highlights, I'm going to make it really, really dramatic. Make it very warm, so we're going to increase it to a nice warm orange color. And as you can see, we can already start to get a very stylized effect. And then for the midtones, I'm going to tone it down to a really cool green color, just to give it a very afternoon feel to it. We'll even make it even more dramatic here. Really warm it up. And kind of simulate a really warm ocean scene here. So as you can see, a really dramatic difference in the look. We'll also go down into the secondary pass and create a vignette. So I'm going to lower down the exposure for this pass. And instead of leaving it like that, we're going to apply a elliptical mass. We're going to invert it. And we'll just expand it a little bit to kind of create our vignette. And we'll change it to 360. And we'll finally go down to the master here and apply some basic curves adjustments. So we'll increase the contrast just a little bit. We'll increase the shadows and lower down the mids. So very subtle here. And as you can see, this is with the color correction and color grading, and this is with before. So a very stylized and dramatic effect, very Hollywood kind of style here. Now, of course, we want to enable motion blur for the composition, enable motion blur for the lens flare, the smoke, and the meteor here. So more realistic results. And of course, you can use real smart motion blur, whatever you want. Now, in the original demonstration, I added a out of focus blur in the beginning, just to kind of establish the mood here. I also created a little displacement here on the right side when the meteor comes. It kind of displaces the footage, and you can use that using a displacement map or even turbulent displays with that adjustment layer. Mask it all out. Now, if you view the article in this tutorial on creativedojo.net, I'll post a whole bunch of recommendations and tips on making it more realistic. In this tutorial, I just want to make it a very generic tutorial just to see how one would create an effect like this. But again, check out the article, read more about it. Now the last thing I'm going to do is create some basic film grain as well as some basic letterboxing using a really basic script that I created in After Effects. So if you go to File here, Script, and run my InstaFilm script, you can see that it automatically creates perfectly even letterboxing and applies a grain adjustment layer with a grain effect on it. So just a really quick way to add some really fast letterboxing and grain. Makes it a lot more stylized here. So let me just do a quick grand preview. So as you can see, just like that, we created a really basic meteor, missile asteroid effect here. We took a look at creating the main element here, linking it up, making our particles and making our flame element. We took a look at how to composite this in, create some basic fake shadows and shading for our smoke, some basic shadows and lighting reflections, as well as some basic color correction and grading. So it's a really quick tutorial. Again, this is my first visual effects tutorials. Things will be a lot more complex and better looking as I progress on, but this is just my first one just to see how it goes. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial, guys. If you guys enjoyed the tutorial, leave a comment down below telling me so. And don't forget to check out the article on creativedojo.net where you can read more about suggestions, tips, and things that I didn't cover in this particular video tutorial. So once again, my name is Vincent Wynn from the Creative Dojo. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.